Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. And today, yes, it is another lesson in insanity. And today I wanted to change history. I want to go back in time to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I want to change history. Instead of the Soviet Union collapsing, we are going to pretend that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization had collapsed. Let's pretend for an instant that there was some sort of economic catastrophe that occurred in the United States, and then that contagion spread to other Western European powers. The United States essentially went bankrupt. No longer the reserve currency, the dollar, no longer the reserve currency. Now fast forward from the collapse of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the collapse of the dollar, followed by the expansion of the Warsaw Pact. Let's pretend, for instance, as we rotate the Earth back to what we are familiar with, and we move to Western Europe. Imagine if all of Germany suddenly became united under a communist regime, followed by a communist revolution occurring in France, and then finally a communist socialist revolution occurring in Spain. Now we'll go and we'll move ahead another 10, maybe 20 years. Economic woes continue throughout non-communist, non-Warsaw Pact economies. Specifically, Mexico. Mexico finds itself in a bloody civil war, which leads to Warsaw Pact peacekeeping forces moving in through Guatemala and Nicaragua into southern Mexico, supporting communist revolutionaries in Mexico. The Mexican government falls, and a communist state forms in Mexico. Would the United States allow it? Would it? What do you think? I'm thinking probably not. I'm thinking the United States at that point, not even considering what intervention the United States may have done in Western Europe, would not have allowed that to happen in Mexico. Let's go further. Remember, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. From the perspectives of someone looking at the Soviet Union from the 1970s, 1980s, you would consider Ukraine as a state within the United States. Let's continue to go further. A communist revolution breaks out in Texas. Quote unquote Mexican American separatists launch an insurgency inside the state of Texas, supported by the Mexican army, what would the United States do? What would happen if Texas broke off from the United States and joined with a theoretical United Communist States of Central and South America, or the Warsaw Pact? What would you, as an American citizen, think? Now look, I get we're going into the realm of something that obviously never happened and most likely will never happen. But if you're in Russia, if you're in the former Soviet Union, specifically Russia, and you see talk of Ukraine joining the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, think about that for a second. If you were to go back to the 1970s and you would ask any person on the earth, be it the United States or Russia, and you would ask this question, what do you think is more likely? Going back to 1970, okay? 1970. What do you think is more likely? That Ukraine separates from the Soviet Union and joins the North Atlantic Treaty Organization successfully, or World War III breaks out? What do you think is more likely? The resounding, overwhelming answer would be World War III would break out. No one in 1970 would ever have thought for a moment that Ukraine would join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is the perspective that you have to look at in terms of the Russian perception of what is happening in Ukraine. That is why the Russians are not going to allow a victory for Ukraine. We will end up in World War III or nuclear war before Russia allows that to happen. And Russia's not going anywhere. The adults have left the building, especially those that are in charge of NATO and the foreign policy of the United States. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand the ramifications of what could and in all probably will happen. Remember, 1970, you would have never thought that Ukraine would join NATO. What are we not seeing in the next 20 years that could happen? It's a scary time, folks. Have a good day.